Howdy. It's that time again. Time for your favorite podcast about that tiny town in the middle of nowhere, or about as close as you can get. This is Untold Tales from this side of nowhere, and I'm your host, Connor Jones. Today I'm bringing you yet another story about growing up in that square state, the one next to Colorado, the one that all the Spanish speakers that I met in California thought was Miami. I guess Wyoming sounds kind of like Miami if you speak Spanish. But before we get started, I would like to tell you about our sponsors. This week, the podcast is sponsored by Basins Market. Basins Market is located in Basin, Wyoming, and it's your destination for groceries, fresh produce, and the best meat department in the Bighorn Basin. Come on in and sample their wide selection of products Monday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Sundays from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. We're also sponsored by the folks at the Wyoming Welcome Program. They offer two services: Table Talk brochures and Wyoming Welcome baskets. The Table Talk brochures are placed on restaurant tables in Cody and Powell and include jokes, facts about Wyoming, the month's holidays, and advertisements from local businesses. The Wyoming Welcome baskets include promotional items including coupons, business cards, and goodies from businesses, and these are distributed to new move-ins to Cody and Powell and the surrounding area. If you're interested in participating in either of these advertising opportunities, just shoot them an email. The email for Wyoming Welcome Program is HaleyJ, that's HALEYJ, at wyomingwelcome.com. And now, the podcast. This week I am actually doing a topic that was requested by my guest a couple weeks ago, my twin brother Adam, and I think that it's a pretty good topic for anyone who has lived in Wyoming, visited Wyoming, or driven I-80 down in the southern part of the state. It seems like every winter I-80 gets closed due to high wind, and it's very common to see high wind warnings telling motorists that no high clearance vehicles or trailers are allowed on a particular stretch of Wyoming highways. And that is because of Wyoming's wind. So that's today's topic. Today's story is called Wyoming Wind. My twin brother once summed Wyoming's wind up quite accurately. While living in Utah, he said of the Salt Lake Valley and its inhabitants, "People here don't know what real wind is. The wind is an infrequent visitor here, but in Wyoming, the wind is a constant companion." Wyoming stands first in the nation for average wind speed. A quick internet search turns up the State Climate Office website, where it reports the average wind speed in Wyoming is 12.9 miles per hour. If you've ever seen the famous, or I should say infamous, Wyoming windsock, then you know what I'm talking about. The Wyoming windsock is no sock at all, in fact, but rather a chain attached to a pole. A sign below the chain explains how to determine wind speed based on the sock's position. At 0 degrees, it says, "Broken. Notify meteorologist." At 30 degrees, meaning the chain is at a 30-degree angle in relation to the vertical pole, that is qualified or classified as a fresh breeze. At 45 degrees, you have a gentle zephyr. At 60 degrees, a hurricane is in the area. At 75 degrees, the sign warns you to beware of low-flying trains. And last, but certainly not least, if that chain is at 90-degree angles, at 90 degrees at a right angle from the pole. Welcome to big, wonderful Wyoming. I think I'm going to be able to put a picture of this sign as the thumbnail for the episode. So hopefully you can see it there and get a good chuckle out of it with me as well. In the photo, credited to one Tom Dietrich, the chain is extended straight outward from the pole at a 90-degree angle, and a low-flying train can be dimly seen in the background. While no part of the cowboy state is exempt from wind, some places are certainly windier than others. Cody, Wyoming, for instance, boasts an almost constant breeze, and when there isn't a breeze blowing, there are gale force winds. The weather coming off the Pacific coast reportedly hits the mountains on the western border of the state and speeds up as it rushes over and down them. The mountains rake all the moisture out of the clouds, creating what is known as the Pacific Northwest, with all its lush green beauty, and then Wyoming gets the leftovers in the form of terrific winds. Cody is especially prone to wind because of the Shoshone Canyon out of Yellowstone. The narrow canyon funnels the wind out onto the little town and blows the newly purchased cowboy hats off of the tourists who stop in Cody after passing through Yellowstone National Park. It's not uncommon to see at least a few cowboy hats bouncing down Sheridan Avenue in downtown Cody on any given day, tourists in tow. Cody has one of the best football teams in the state, having won multiple state titles. What's their secret? I think it has to do with the fact that their quarterbacks become experts in throwing in windy conditions. No other team has to learn to judge wind speed and trajectory like a Cody quarterback, though quarterbacks in the southern part of the state are quite adept at it as well. Since the towns in the south generally fall into a different class than Cody, though, the teams from the windiest towns in the state seldom get the chance to play against each other. The wind in Cody becomes a great home field advantage when opposing teams come to play. Here come the Star Valley Braves looking to march downfield. There's the snap, and the quarterback has time. He's looking downfield, and the throw, whoops, incomplete. I don't think he was trying to throw that one backward, but the wind in Cody can be unpredictable. Reduced to just their running game, opponents are soon flattened. Only Cody quarterbacks can precisely time their throws between wind gusts so their passes reach their intended receivers. No one has quite figured out how to kick into the wind, though, so if you're on the wrong side of the field, you can forget about punting. On the flip side, many state records have been set with a stiff Cody wind at a kicker's back. I became acquainted with the Wyoming wind from a very young age. One afternoon, my twin brother Fred and I joined my dad for a day of sheep herding in the Red Hills south of my uncle's sheep ranch, where we looked for a spot out of the wind to sit while the sheep grazed. Finding no such location, we settled for a place where the wind only blew sand rather than rocks into our eyes. Perhaps the wind's only redeeming quality in Wyoming is that it is usually pretty consistent and does not often change directions, not unlike a buffalo running downhill. This allows you the luxury of putting your back to the wind while you herd sheep, which is what we did. "Ah, isn't this nice?" Dad bellowed as the wind whipped around us. "What?" I shouted back. "Yep," Dad replied, leaning back against a rock. "Dad, why does it have to be so windy?" Fred complained. "That's Wyoming for you," Dad replied. "Some of the longest days of my life have been spent standing in the wind out here in the hills herding sheep. But you get used to it after a while." For a while, we watched the sheep milling about among the brush and rocks as wind howled around them. I didn't get any more used to the wind after that while. Fred and I huddled near Dad, trying in vain to escape the wind. "Now what do we do?" Fred asked Dad. "We watch the sheep," Dad replied. "What for?" I asked. "Well, to make sure they're safe from predators like coyotes." "Okay," Fred nodded, wiping at some dirt that had found its way past his squinted eyelids. Dad nodded, clamping one hand on his hat as a particularly nasty gust threatened to dislodge it from his head. "You have to stay alert. No napping or letting the sheep out of your sight." "So you have to watch the sheep the whole time you're with them? Is that so a coyote doesn't get any of the sheep?" I asked. "Nah," Dad said. "That's why we have guard dogs," he said, pointing out one of the giant white Great Pyrenees that roamed around the edge of the herd, its fur whipping in the wind. "We have to keep an eye out so we can chase down any sheep that blow away." Our eyes widened as we considered the prospect of wind strong enough to carry off livestock. "Really?" Fred gasped. Dad's laugh was cut short when a bunch of sand blew into his teeth, and he spit several times to get the grit out of his mouth. Unsure of whether or not Dad was serious, Fred and I watched the sheep intently, hoping we just might get to witness a woolly ewe or two bouncing across the plains. Lucky for the sheep, and for us, we didn't see any livestock take flight that day. Even though hardly a day goes by without wind in Wyoming, one of its more nefarious characteristics is its ability to materialize out of nowhere. It could be a perfectly calm day, one of the few we get in Wyoming, but as soon as you start an activity or a project that the wind would wreck, it shows up like a freight train in a Looney Tune. It's almost as if the wind knows you're burning a pasture right next to your grandmother's house, and a stiff breeze in just the right direction will significantly increase your chances of getting cut out of someone's will right after they receive a hefty chunk of insurance money. Trying to set up a tent is an absolute nightmare in the cowboy state. One summer, my wife and our 2 boys joined my in-laws on a trip to British Columbia, Canada. While there, we spent a few nights in a large tent owned by my in-laws. The tent was so large, it even had dividing curtains that quartered the tent and gave the occupants separate sleeping spaces. I thought the tent was pretty slick, and my wife actually agreed to purchasing a similar one I discovered on Facebook Marketplace. "Gee, I can't imagine why anyone would sell a huge tent like this for $50, I marveled after heaving the tent into the back of the pickup. "I bet we could fit 3 air mattresses in this thing." "Yeah, it looks great," Lily agreed. "Did you ask the guy if there was anything wrong with it? Maybe it has a hole or something." "I asked him and he said it was in perfect condition. He said they only used it once," I replied. Maybe that should have been a warning sign, or even the crazed look in the eye of the man who sold it to me. If anything, the full body cast should have raised a question or two. As it was, I was too pleased with my thrift to take heed of such red flags. It wouldn't be the first time my naivete would cost me. I decided we should set up the tent in the backyard just to test it out and make sure it was clean and in working condition. It was a beautiful summer day with hardly a breath of wind when I began rolling out the tent. "Look at the size of that thing," I exclaimed. "It'll sleep a division." My excitement was short-lived. As soon as enough canvas was exposed to make things interesting, Wyoming's wind started playing with me. At first, it was a random breeze that came and frolicked around the edges of the tent, folding over a corner here and lifting the edge there. I quickly slapped these annoyances back down as I unfolded more and more of the tent. When at last the 10-man sail was fully spread out across an area that could have contained a square dance, a freak wind came whipping across the yard. The leaves on the trees chattered in warning, and dandelion fluff filled my eyes as the gale unleashed itself. "Arr!" I bellowed, launching myself on top of the tent. It was too late. Before I knew it, the whole thing was wrapped around me, attacking my arms, legs, and face as I flailed around helplessly. I stumbled backward, vainly attempting to stop as the wind whipped around me. Suddenly, another gust lifted myself and the tent off the ground, and for a terrifying moment, I was airborne. "Lily!" I wailed, but my cries were drowned out by the howl of the Wyoming wind. I barely felt the fence when it hit the back of my knees, but the force of the impact sent me tumbling through the air, and then I was falling. I couldn't see anything beyond the tent, which was bear-hugging me and had no intentions of letting go. Everything was dark and chaotic, not unlike a high school homecoming dance. My breath caught in my throat, and I tried to scream, but couldn't. When I finally hit the ground, I wasn't sure which way was up and which way was down. I also wondered where all the water had come from. Coughing and spluttering, I clawed my way out of the tangle of canvas and emerged like a drowned cat, only to find that the tent and I had come to rest in the neighbor's inflatable swimming pool. I heaved myself out of the water and collapsed, soaking wet and in no mood to go camping. "Al, are you all right?" my neighbor called across the yard, rushing out of his house. "Murgle Fibbletish," I replied from my supine position. "Why on earth are you setting up a tent in a windstorm?" he bellowed. Regaining my voice, I muttered, "It wasn't windy when I started. Sorry about the fence." I pulled myself up into a sitting position, and we both surveyed the damage as the wind whipped around us. The top rail was cracked between a pair of posts, and leaves and sticks skittered across the ground. "It's all right," my neighbor sighed. "I still have some wood left over from last time." When the young man appeared on the doorstep, I didn't think he looked like a sucker, but then again, I probably didn't either. "Is this the Jones residence?" he asked. "Sure is," I replied, beaming. "You must be Dave." "Yes," he nodded, and we shook hands. I almost felt sorry for the guy. "Your post said you have a tent?" he asked. "Sure do," I said. "Do you have cash?" "Yep, $50 is a bargain for a 10-man tent," the unwitting young man said. "Oh, I can be too generous sometimes," I said dismissively. "Here, it's in the garage." We walked over to the garage, and I heaved the tent off its place on a shelf. "Gee, thanks," Dave said, grinning. He accepted the tent and handed me his money. "You know what?" I said. "You can keep the cash. This one is on me." Dave's eyes widened. "Really? Is something wrong with it?" Suspicion had edged into his voice, and he looked uneasy. "Nah, nothing wrong," I said. "I checked it all over for holes when it was drying out." "Oh, did you take it camping in the rain?" Dave asked. "No, it wasn't raining," I replied. "I would just make sure you stake it down before you put the poles in. You never know when the wind will come up." "No worries," Dave said, his grin returning. "I know all about camping in the wind." "I see," I replied. "Where did you say you were from?" "Oh, I'm from California," Dave replied. "We just bought a house last month." "Well, welcome to Wyoming, Dave," I smiled. "Good luck with your tent." And there you have it. Another untold tale from this side of nowhere. Yeah, Wyoming wind. If you are a returning listener or a frequent listener, then you might just remember the episode I did called What Would You Do for a Klondike? In that episode, I told the story of the scout trip, the winter camping expedition known as a Klondike, where we all camped at the Deaver Reservoir. And during the night, a 90-mile-per-hour wind came up, and the effects were catastrophic for some people. So if you haven't listened to What Would You Do for a Klondike, it dovetails quite well with this episode on Wyoming wind. So, Adam, if you're listening, and I hope you will listen, thank you so much for the suggestion on Wyoming wind. I had a great time writing this one and recording it. And if you are a frequent listener and you have an idea for a story, be sure to shoot me an email at untoldtalesthepodcast@gmail.com or comment on this post when it drops on Facebook. And you just might get the opportunity to have one of your stories come to life. Oh, and I'd like to make an official call for guests. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then please let me know. And this applies to family and friends who have already been. I'm good with return guests, but this is an official call. If you would like to be part of Untold Tales from this side of nowhere, please let me know, and I'll happily include you as a guest on the podcast. As always, it's been a real pleasure sharing this story with you, and I hope that you'll join me in a couple weeks when the next one comes out. And this has been another Untold Tale from this side of nowhere, where we work twice as hard for half as much, and still find time for the important things, like fishing. See you next time, folks.